Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to listen to our LinkedIn Live today, where we're going to be talking about all things data management and data governance with the emergence of our new market here at Harnham. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Holly and I'm heading up our newly formed data management and governance team here. And for those of you that don't know Harnham, we are the leaders in end-to-end data talent solutions, and we support businesses with hires from entry level right up to exec level. And when it comes to the entry level hires, our sister company Rockborne are working with the next generation of diverse data consultants to help them learn the process of collection, curation and consumption. And I'm really pleased today to be joined by Rockborne CEO Waseem and data expert Barry. And I'll hand over to them to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Holly, and it's really, really good to be on the show with yourself and Barry today, and congratulations on the new team. I think you've heard me talk about the importance of data management in the entire data lifecycle, so I'm really excited personally that we're doing this here at Harnham. So my name is Waseem Ali. I've been a data person, a nerdy data person, for about 15 odd years. I started my career in the NHS. I moved on to consulting. I headed up all things to do with data for a company called Virgin. Before setting up my own data consultancy, where I focused in on data strategy, consulting and training services for a range of different industries. I was fortunate enough to sell that company, and then I moved to Lloyd's of London as their chief data officer, managing an end-to-end data insights and research team of about 120 odd people. And at Rockborne, I'm the CEO at Rockborne. I have the privilege of being the CEO at Rockborne. We are a specialist attract, train and deploy consultancy company, and we specialise in deploying diverse data consultants to all of our clients.
Hi, thanks for having me, Holly and Waseem. So I'm Barry Hosted. I'm the Director of Data Management at the John Lewis Partnership.
I guess the first topic I'd like to speak to you about and address is actually just a high-level definition of what you think data management is.
Yeah, so I think for me, data governance is the creation of policies, standards, so the rules around how we look after our data. And then data management is the enacting of those policies and standards and how that plays out into tooling. Sometimes there's an overlap between what we would call data management and data engineering and data architecture, but it's kind of all on the same sort of spectrum.
I'm assuming, would you have the same view?
Yeah, I mean, it would be difficult to disagree with the data management expert in the room. Absolutely. So for me, really simplistically, governance is about the policy and frameworks around data in an organisation, whereas data management is about the execution. I guess the confusion sometimes is because they sometimes sit within the same area. So you could have a data governance team within a data management team overall. In smaller organisations, people end up doing dual roles. That's probably where the confusion comes from. But I think when it comes to policies and frameworks around the use of data, even compliance and risk, that's governance.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. And I guess, obviously being a recruiter, I'm obviously going to talk about hiring in this market. I think it's safe to say that last year was a really tricky time for a lot of businesses. And, you know, we saw a lot of the big tech companies make redundancies and things. So there was a lot of really good talent on the market. Waseem, perhaps I'll come to you first this time. What impacts do you think that the industry, faced last year with the downturn in the economy?
I'll perhaps come at it from a client perspective, because we are a consultancy. So we did see clients, and I know a lot of consultancies did as well. We did see clients back their plans for larger scale projects, and often in the digital data and technology space. I guess there was almost like a spike post-COVID. Well, we said that to say post-COVID, but I'll say it anyway. Post-COVID, where everyone was doing digital data transformations, the market was booming, and then suddenly it kind of went to wait. We're going to pause some of these projects. So we saw that, and we saw the effect of that in consultancies. And I have seen clients pause their projects, their hiring plans, and unfortunately have to make cutbacks as well. I mean, there's no secret, it's all over the news, right? I haven't specifically, if your question's around have I seen a pattern around data management, this is where I'm really interested in your view. I haven't actually seen a pattern whereby companies are cutting data management or governance resources in particular. What I have seen, though, is actually perhaps newer CDOs into their roles or newer leaders into their roles are trying to adopt a technology-first strategy when it comes to data management and governance, where some, I guess, larger consultancy companies are saying, actually, that's the way to go. Technology is the way to go. That's the solution to everything. the kind of the new CDOs or data leaders are almost interpreting that as, well, we don't need people, we just need the technology. Whereas I don't think that's right, and it's definitely not what these large strategy consultancies are inferring. So I guess that's what I'm seeing more of, and I always try and encourage, and I love your view on this, is that's not, technology will not replace your people. You still need people to use that technology and enable the right definitions and work with the business.
Yeah, no, I definitely echo that. I think data management, data governance is, yes, underpinned by technology, but it's ultimately a people and process. I think to answer your question, Holly, we saw two things, right? So we saw a bit of a tightening of budgets around what we were doing for non-permanent employees, and being a bit more constrained around how we were going to deploy that sort of workforce. From a permanent perspective, we were lucky enough that we didn't make any redundancies, and actually attrition was quite low because obviously the market was quite tight. But what we did see is when we did try and backfill roles, we saw a much higher candidate response rate, which pluses and minuses, right? You've got a bigger pool to filter through and a bigger pool to sift out, but equally we were seeing a new influx of talent and actually more senior folks looking for more junior roles as a result of that. The other downside of that was they were also interviewing with multiple people at the same time, so we missed out. It was all about pace at that time. You had to be quick through the recruitment cycle to actually get people through the door. So I think it started to level out. We were lucky enough that we were able to backfill most of our governance roles. I would have been interested to understand from a recruitment perspective whether it was different across sector. So certainly coming from a financial services background, you've got the drive of regulation, and that's the one thing that keeps people focused on data governance and data management. Now in retail, it's less regulated from a data perspective. You kind of find that it's almost felt optional, but actually, we'll get onto it later, but I think it's probably one of the critical success factors for developing a strategy going forward.
Leads on to my next point about hiring this year, because luckily things have started to stabilise, and budgets are being reassessed, projects being released. So I'm keen to hear, I guess, back to you, Barry, what roles within the data management and governance space you think are going to be most sought after for hiring managers to hire this year?
Yeah, so I think more so on the data management side than on the data governance side. I think we'll see a return of enterprise type roles back into the function. So data quality being one of those. I think with the excitement around AI, the improvement in the quality of our underlying data is going to be fundamental for any of that to be successful. So I think we'll start to see data quality come back up on the agenda for folks. And I think on the flip side of that, we'll probably see more of a demand for, I don't even know what the role is, but ethics type people that are looking at, just because legally we can use the data to do that thing, should we? What's our own policies and our own principles from an organisational perspective, and then moving into AI and ML governance as a result of that. I think kind of those two ends of the spectrum for data management and data governance.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'd echo that actually, and I think it's actually a really exciting time to be in the space of data management and governance because of the hype around AI. And I know we'll perhaps cover it in a bit as well, but I think data management and data governance is going to be a fundamental part of the success of any sort. If you look at what happens in post an economic downturn, how organisations open up, I guess is the term to use. So I think initially what they do, they don't automatically say, let's go hire hundreds of people in this space. What they might start to do is open the gates for some of the projects that they perhaps have paused, or reevaluate some of those projects. So perhaps, and I'm not sure if this is the same in your organisation, but perhaps interim resources or consultancy kind of spend will start opening up initially, and that will then lead to perm hires happening, because when a project gets delivered, you need perm hires to kind of roll out the solution. Yeah. So there might be a phase of kind of interim resources as projects open up, with perm shortly following afterwards. That's certainly what I've seen when I've kind of come out of a downturn in some way, shape, or form. But I think time will tell, and the technology advancements will tell.
I think you just touched on it both a little bit there, but how would you see organisations showcasing value, Barry, for hires that need to be made?
Yeah, so this is really interesting debate that we're constantly having. So data management, data governance are always seen as enabling functions. There's never, the visualization, the data science is always the sexy end, and folks see that because that's the thing they're interfacing with. So the way we've approached it at the partnership is looking at enabled value. So we track all the way from the sourcing of the data all the way through to the production of data products to enable consumption. And we measure, what part of the platform has enabled that value. How have we tracked that through? It's not easy, and it's not that well understood at the moment. But one of our strategy principles is data as an asset, and we've got ambitions, but data on the balance sheet. Will we ever get there? Don't know yet. But yeah, value enablement and value engineering as a construct to be able to measure that, I think is really important. Benefits realization of the end product is much easier, but being able to justify spending millions of pounds to do some plumbing when actually the thing at the other end is the bit that's going to release the value. I mean, it's Waseem's world, right? The fancy showy bits of data. But I think, value enablement is one of the things that we're really starting to push harder on to be able to show, justify our position within the organisation.
It's so difficult to justify the value or put a return on investment business case together around it. It's almost, and I'm not saying it is easier, it's still hard to do, but it's easier to do in the data analytics or data science space where you can showcase value and return on investment and stuff. So actually for me, I've grown up in the BI space and visual analytics space and stuff, and you can always talk about things like cost saving for people. So you're automating processes, so they're going to save time, and you can add a quantitative value to that. And what you're not doing, and as data leaders, you need to be careful about not doing this, is what you're not saying at that point is because we've saved that amount of time, you don't need that amount of a person. What you're saying is they can do their role better. And then you could talk about cost saving when you're analysing things like your suppliers or supplier products. I mean, a good friend of ours and your manager, Barry Pranay, always uses this example, which you probably memorised around. He used to do some work for a large care homes in the UK, and he always uses this example when you talk around the tin of beans, and he analysed a data set of all the care homes across this organisation, and he found a variation in the spend that they were spending on the tin of beans. And actually what he ended up doing, and I can't remember the exact figure, and maybe it was £1 million, right? So the differential there was £1 million on a tin of beans. Now, why as a care centre manager would you care about shows my lack of knowledge of 50p tin of beans. Why would you care whether it's 50p or 56p? But actually, if you analyse that all together as a group, that's a huge saving to think about. And maybe if Barry, this is a test, if Barry Pranay listening, if he can tell us the right number in the chat, and we'll see if he's doing that. And the other thing is, of course, revenue generation opportunities, right? Especially for e-commerce companies, and I'm sure John Lewis will be one of them as well, where actually there is, if you go onto a website for an e-commerce company and you buy a particular product, or they recommend something to you. So actually there's revenue generation opportunities there as well. So it's almost easier in the kind of the other side of it, the shiny visualization side, the data science side.
Okay, interesting. I like the analogy. And obviously I know you're both super keen to talk about AI, as I'm sure a lot of our viewers are going to be keen to hear about. So I mean, we're seeing at Harnham, just in this year alone, so since January, we've actually seen an increase in 15% of our roles that have an element of AI in them. So obviously with the fact that this is emerging and AI governance is coming into play, teams and businesses are starting to implement this. Waseem, I'll come to you first with this one. What impact do you see AI having on the governance industry?
So I guess the first thing I'll say, and I think I might have said this before, so apologies if someone's already heard me say this, but AI itself isn't new. It has been around for years. I mean, since you were born, really, in the 1950s. It's been around, and I think arguably, Alan Turing's paper was the first kind of foray into this in the 1950s. But the buzz lately has been due to generative AI and the introduction of OpenAI, ChatGPT, Bard, etc. So it's worth kind of understanding what type of AI generative AI is, because it's a subset of AI in general, right? And generative AI is all about the generation of content, whether that be text, images, audio, media. What generative AI does is it's trained on really, really large data sets, and it allows you to ask human-like questions, which is prompts and prompt engineering, to get human-like responses, right? That's the core of it, and that can be on images or text. The tech is powerful, but with any powerful technology in the artificial intelligence space, it requires training. and retraining and retraining again. And the example we saw a few days, I don't know if you saw the DPD example, right? So someone prompted the DPD chatbot to swear back, and it was quite amusing in the end. But actually, that's an example of why you should be retraining your generative AI models constantly in order to kind of prevent situations like that. Right? This is why risk and regulation and governance is so important in the AI space for me, because I think the technology skills, and I'm not saying they're not difficult, but I think from a technology point of view, what's going to happen is your current data scientist or machine learning engineers, or name a title in that kind of space, will pivot and become AI engineers. But the roles that I think are going to become really, really crucial to the organization is around regulation, management, governance, ethics. You mentioned ethics earlier, and ethics is for me, is really simple. It's doing the right thing with data. And that's all to ensure that you have the right data, access at the right time, by the right people, at the right quality. And the fact of the matter is, if you don't have that data in the right time, at the right quality, access by the right people, AI is useless.
Yeah, I completely agree with Waseem. I think if you boil it back to your stat there, Holly, 15% of new roles have got some form of AI in it. It's going to become table stakes, right? Everyone's going to have to understand both the power and the responsibility that comes with that power. And there's a huge untapped opportunity that most organizations won't even be looking at. But it's not even as simple as the stuff that us as organizations want to implement. Vendors are more and more, you can't turn your head now without having a vendor's product that finishes in GPT. It's in everyday IT now. It's in everything that we do. And there is fear around AI, and there is fear that it's going to take over and take our jobs. And I liken it to the Industrial Revolution. It was really big and scary at the time, and folks were concerned about what would happen. And yes, it changed some jobs, but it didn't fundamentally change the whole recruitment process. It changed the fact that there was a new type of job that we haven't yet thought about. And I think AI will do a similar thing. But to Waseem's point, we've absolutely got to be controlled with that. And we've got to understand both the commercial benefit of doing it, but also the regulatory and the reputational impact of getting it wrong. But as Waseem said, it's not new, right? There's been stories for years of, when ML was first new, machine learning was first new, there was a case of Target in the US that was doing personalization and sent some vouchers to a mother and father about their new baby. Well, actually, it was their 15-year-old daughter. So there's, we need to be very careful with how we use it. And there's going for, mass publicly available things like ChatGPT that's trained on the internet versus something that's fine-tuned to your context and possibly even your domain, testing that in a secure way internally first. There's lots and lots of use cases around internal knowledge portals that basically expose more information to the workforce than they've ever been able to access before. Like, you can do that safely. It's not going to cause reputational risk unless it's leaked and things like that. So I think it's all about how we move towards it. I think the other thing is there's a huge possibility for resource stretch, both from an understanding perspective and a capacity perspective. There's a new type of productivity we can get from our workforce by augmenting with co-piloting. And again, it needs to be controlled and it needs to be well thought out. So I don't think it's something we should be scared of, but I think it's something we should be conscious of and make decisions purposefully around. And I think in terms of the roles that it'll bring in, I think you're right. I think we'll start to see more and more AI ethicists. I think we'll start to see folks that are focusing purely on the governance. But legislation is kind of quite black and white, right? And you can go, I'm either inside the regulation or I'm outside. Ethics is much more blurry, and it's kind of like, it's opinionated, and it's very difficult to set a line in the sand on. I think that's where we start to get into a nuance, because I might have an opinion of something that you've got a completely different opinion to. And that's kind of like, you've got to take the broad view of the world. Are we going to upset people? Well, we can end up on the front page of a tabloid newspaper. So I think there's a real consciousness that we're going to have and not just run at this new technology blindly.
And are you already starting to think about roles more focused on AI in your world, or is it kind of a bit too? Because actually different people and this kind of links to one of the questions that we've just had. And sorry, my eyes are terrible. It's from Jagadish. Thank you for your question. He's talking about the role of the chief AI officer and the remit role, or does it just depend on the complexity of the business or AI? So, kind of, what's your take? Are you already starting to think about that?
So less around the roles that we'll need specifically for AI, but certainly frameworks around machine learning and ML ops, and how we're going to deploy and make sure that the models are kept up to date and safe. And that moves out into AI ops and LLM ops, and another one of these overloaded terms that you add ops to the end of, and everyone wants one. So we're thinking about it from a governance perspective around the standards and the policies and the guardrails that we're going to put in, because I think if we go too controlling, then we'll stifle innovation and people will just go skunkworks and do it themselves anyway. Yeah. So we're kind of trying to go, right, these are the guardrails, these are the things to operate in. But it's more than just the technology, it's more than just the governance of the data. It's you talked about LLMs trained on vast amounts of data. Well, that costs a huge amount. And actually, there's quite a sustainability impact from training large language models. So we might go, well, actually, we're not going to do it because we've got green credentials that mean we would never go there. So it's now more than just the context of the data that you're talking about. And I think to pick up on Jagdish's question around Chief AI Officer, I think we'll start to see the emergence of that role, but I think it will be more akin initially to the CDO 1.0, defensive strategy, talking about how we're going to do this safely, how we're going to put controls and governance in, probably with quite an acceleration then into the offensive delivery of that value, because ultimately we're not going to be doing it to make ourselves safer, we're doing it because we want to increase the value proposition. So I think that will change pretty quickly, quicker than CDO roles changed, I think.
Sorry to bring it back to my kind of BI world, but even back in the day when you used to roll out BI solutions, there was almost two flavors. There was like the Wild West, which is basically go do whatever you want in the organization, do whatever you want with the data, doesn't matter. And then there was a very centralized, controlled method of doing it, which is you have to log a ticket and someone who's an expert on the data will build you a report and then shift it out. But the reality of those two extremes is it's always in the middle is the best answer. So how can you enable people to self-serve and learn about the data and produce the insights that they want, whilst controlling the access to the data and all the management and governance frameworks around it? I think it's going to be the same with AI, right? So how do you create a controlled environment to allow people to gain the benefits of it, whilst not kind of completely blocking it off as well? And I think that role will happen. I think some organisations will perhaps morph it into the CDO role, or morph it into the Chief Technology Officer role, or take your pick. But I think some organisations will see. I think a few already have a Chief AI Officer.
Great. Well, thanks for that. I'm going to move on to talk about skills required and needed in this industry, because I'm sure we're going to have some viewers here today that are hopefully looking to get into the data governance space, or they're looking for a move within. So Barry, I guess as a hiring manager, I'd ask you, what we see and what I have seen so far from having recruited into this space is that communication, stakeholder management skills seems to be the most desired skill set. I'm keen to know what you would advise someone if they're looking to get into data governance in particular.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's split between soft skills, organisational skills and technical skills, right? And Waseem picked up on the point earlier, it's not all around the technology. For me, data stewardship, data governance is a relationship business more so than anything else. So communication, curiosity and influencing skills, I think, are probably the three primary ones for anyone in that sphere, be it a junior data steward all the way up to a data governance manager. You're essentially trying to convince people about something they don't necessarily understand and trying to convince them sometimes to spend money to fix a problem or to deliver something. So those three things I think are imperative. And then from a technical perspective, you need to be able to understand the sort of the cousin relationship with data management. So you need to be able to understand metadata management, what it is and why it's important, data quality. And then as you move up through the roles, I think policy definition, standard definition, those sorts of things become more prevalent. And I think then you start to get into a different type of communication. So how to write a policy that is easily understandable by a layman, because it's very easy as a data professional to get bogged down into jargon, and then no one understands it, and therefore no one implements the policy, and no one wants to do it. But I think there's an interesting debate around domain knowledge. So should you be an expert in financial services, banking products to be able to be a data steward in that area? Sometimes I think regulated environments, you probably need to be more of an expert in that world, or at least have an appreciation for it. But I think you can learn the domain knowledge, or you could be a deep expert in that area and learn the governance side of things. But I don't think you kind of necessarily need to be both.
I'd also extend that to people managing data standards as well. I remember kind of in a previous life in Lloyd's, the individuals that I had managing data standards were experts in insurance, and they knew about that, and that's absolutely right. Could I have picked someone up from retail and put them into that role? Probably, but their learning curve would have been huge. So sometimes you do need that expert industry knowledge. But back to your earlier point, Ollie, 100% agree on communication. I think, let's all face it, we're semi-nerdy, including yourself, Ollie, so we find data really exciting, but most people find it as actually quite a boring topic. And if you translate that to organizations, it could be seen as a blocker as well, right? And so actually what any data person, especially in the governance and the management space, needs to do is they need to really hone, and they need people in their team who are good communicators, and then they can work with the business, understand their challenges, support and help them, and actually, I'm going to use the word sell, but sell to them as well, because that's so important, because it's all well and good going there and putting a policy in place, but that policy is not worth anything if not people aren't following it. And so that's why it's so important. And some of the reasons that I've seen some successes in my career, and the best data management and governance people that I've seen, including yourself, are superb communicators, and they know how to engage a business.
I think that's one of the other things that we're starting to see, not necessarily a specific role, but a data enablement function sat alongside governance that is doing that storytelling, is selling the reason why, to help the governance team build that out and then go and implement it. It's just kind of the bridge between data governance and data management, sat in the middle, pushing the content out. It can be quite dry, right? Even for a data professional, it feels hard to digest sometimes. And I think someone that is a buyer in John Lewis has got no intent or interest in understanding data governance. But if you articulate it in a way that means something to them, then it's really important. So, if our cost price for things was to get into the wrong hands, that would be really detrimental to us. Well, that's a data governance problem. That's a policy and control problem. But we can't articulate to the buyer in that way. We've got to talk to them in their language. And I think that's where the balance of domain knowledge really comes in, being able to understand how to use language that they understand to articulate the problem that we're trying to get to.
And we've had some questions from the audience. Let's look at Robert's question. He says, what are the chat's thoughts on assigning ownership, i.e. who owns customer? Barry, any thoughts?
If I talk about the context of John Lewis Partnership, so we've got 3 brands sat under the John Lewis Partnerships. We've got John Lewis, we've got Waitrose, and we've got a financial services business. And there is a constant debate on who owns customer. I think there's a difference. It depends in what context we're talking about ownership. So technical ownership of the platforms and systems that underpin customer data, I think, is one aspect. On the other aspect, you've got the definitions, the principles, the policies around it. So I think 2 aspects of ownership are different. I think it's got to be the person that has the most influence over that domain. And I don't think that's specific to customer. I think that's specific to any domain. It's the person or people that care the most about the thing. And by care about it, I mean, at times want to put their hand in their pocket, want to change how we do things and make difficult decisions. Like, we might choose to not over personalize on a customer because we've breached our own ethical principles, or it's got to be someone that understands the context, understands the domain, and then is able to have a rounded discussion on that. We're just on that journey at the moment. So we've just rolled out data ownership across all of our domains, and it's a mixed bag. There's, some folks that have jumped on it. They see the problems that they're having today and can see how ownership can fix it. And others, it's much more of a harder task. And actually they want to see end-to-end process and be able to understand, what's in it for them. So I think, to answer Rob's question, it's got to be the person that wants to impact that domain the most.
Yeah, I'd agree. I was really interested in Barry's answer because actually it is very B2C.
Yeah.
Where you work was actually very B2B, so it's a slightly different setup in that sense. But I completely agree. Who cares the most about the customer and the outcome that you're looking for? And I think ultimately different people at different stages of the data life cycle as the customer comes in, but actually that obsession with the customer is the person that should own it at the end, and that will be different people in different scenarios. on that side. Probably slightly different for B2B because it might fall into the remit of Lloyd's was a B2B business, really, essentially. So we wouldn't be applying a recommendation engine for Lloyd's market participants because it was a regulated industry. So it's slightly different in that sense. But
okay, great, good to know. And we'll take one more, perhaps from Sonia, who asks what should be the approach where businesses say that data is good and dashboards are good? Why do we need a data team?
Great question. Thank you, Sonia, for the question. I think it's if data is good and the dashboards are good, that shows to me that the and if the business is asking the question as to why do we need people now, or why do we need a data team, that's almost showing me that the business is using data in quite a transactional way. So we've hit the first of the month, let's do end of month reporting, or let's call it a management information pack, let's export it to PDF and do stuff like that. If the organisation is using data well, it's asking more and more questions from it. And it's constantly asking the data team to produce insights from the questions that they have. And when would a business be able to do that is when they're trying to grow a particular area. So you know what, we're seeing profits down in the south. What's going on? Who's offering discounts? Who's doing this? Who's doing that? And I think actually we've seen the successes of businesses that use data well versus not well in the past, right? And history dictates that. So for me, if you're at a point where your dashboards are built and the business doesn't want anything else, the business isn't asking the right questions from the data or trying to get the right information from the data. Now, as someone who's kind of moved almost away from the data space a little bit, although we run data consultancy, I constantly ask my team questions around the data, and I'm constantly asking for more and more information. Sometimes they don't have it and they get annoyed and they have to source it externally, but that's what you should be doing in order to drive that information, because as a leader of a business, I need to be equipped with all of this information in order to make the right strategic decision.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And it's not a coincidence, right? The data's good and the dashboards are good because the data team's there keeping it fed and watered.
Yeah.
Take them away, then it stops being good. And to Waseem's point, is good enough? Well, probably not. You're clearly not stretching the boundaries of the data.
It's interesting. What happens if something breaks then, right? So the dashboards are good and the data's good. We're not going to have a data team. What happens if someone breaks them?
Yeah, exactly.
Because code always breaks. That's the nature of it. There's a new release of a product and that's damaged certain bits of code. If there's no one there monitoring it, then the dashboards are broken and suddenly it's oh my God, let's bring in a bunch of interim resources to do it. Really interesting question.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for that. Just slightly conscious of time, I'm going to move us on to the next topic, which I'm keen to talk about, which is diversity. Here at Harnham, we've just released our new diversity guide, and there's a stat in there that states that 29% of data professionals in general, not just data management and governance, are female. And having recruited in this space for a couple of months now, I've seen that the percentage in data management governance is significantly higher. So I was keen to know what that percent might be for the data governance space. Barry, I don't know what you've seen on that.
Yeah, so I'd agree. I think it is predominantly, it's a mix. So 3/4 of my leadership team are female. I don't have that mix within the teams, but I do see a broad range of candidates coming through. And I think, across the different aspects of diversity, I think there's an importance around sex, but also around neurodiversity and how that's coming in, because the diversity of thought that you get from different people is the bit that makes the data usable and important. Otherwise, you just get overly biased data sets that look and feel like the people that are developing them. So I think it's good that it's happening. I think I think some of it is industry skew as well. We saw less diversity in some of the more traditional stuffy organisations. And I think that will start to change as people move around and as the market becomes a bit more buoyant. But certainly in retail, it is predominantly female.
Rockborne are working to help businesses diversify themselves, and particularly from a data perspective. So yeah, definitely keen to hear your views on this.
It's our purpose at Rockborne, right? And it's something that I feel really passionate about, having worked for some of those organisations that you're mentioning. And I personally remember being in large meetings where I was one of the only people of ethnic minority in that conversation as well. So it's something that I'm very, very passionate about, and I think the Harnham Group in general are quite passionate about as well. So actually, maybe go into a bit of a history lesson of where Rockborne was formed here a little bit, because actually what Harnham realised as a talent company very early on, they've been going for about 17 years, is what they realised is actually if an organisation like John Lewis wanted to focus on hiring females as an example, because that was your question, they would almost have to pick a female from another organisation to put into your organisation. So they've done good by you as a talent sourcer, but the other organisation has got that problem. So there's almost this continuous loop of where you're circling talent. And that's kind of the formation of Rockborne. So the only way you can actually make an impact on the industry is actually start from the ground up. And we've got a real opportunity to make a significant impact on the data industry by making data a more attractive proposition for not only females, but all walks of diversity. As Barry said, I mean, if you think about the most successful sports teams, they've got different skill sets. And those different skill sets come from will naturally come from different diverse backgrounds. That's the same theory applies when you're building a data team and you're building a business. So we're trying to do it from kind of ground up, and we're trying to make data as accessible for everyone. So typically, if you're a graduate in data, you'll typically come from a data science background or a STEM background, as an example. Nothing wrong with that. Congratulations if you've had that background. But who's to say that if you're from a geography background, you don't make a good data person? I've got evidence that says they make one of the best data people. Right, so actually that's what we try and push at Rockborne, and we're incredibly passionate about it. And I think if we get the business right, in 5 years we would have made a significant impact into the data industry, and hopefully the conversation changes from binary male female to non-binary as well, because that's that we always talk about male and female, we don't talk about non-binary in this conversation, and I'd love to start talking.
Yeah. Sure. Great, thanks for that. It's really good to hear your views on that one as well. I'm going to turn back to some of the viewers' questions here just before we wrap up. So Louise says, what are the basic direct or common structures need to have in the areas to define their data management and data governance policies? Christine, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Directives or common structures? I think what Lewis is trying to ask here is what are the different elements of a data governance policy or framework that you need to adopt within an organisation, and perhaps what the approach is for that as well. What you need to consider for me is, and this is going to sound really basic, hopefully you can add some more technical detail into this, but is you need to consider the end-to-end data lifecycle in your organisation. So think of it, we talk about data pipelines in engineering, right? So think of it of when the data comes in, how good is the data when it comes in? What data quality stage gates have you got into it? How are you then taking that through your pipe and applying different calculations, different definitions for the usage of that data for either reporting, recommendations, regulatory reasons? How are you applying those different things? And that should be the basis of how you form your data governance policy. So it's every stage of when the data comes in to it goes out, and what are the different stage gates you need around that. I'm sure you can go more technical into that.
Well, no, it doesn't need to be any more technical than that, right? We should be simplifying policy, and I think the only thing I would add is you take that to one stage further. So, it's all around the collection and management processing of that data, the storage and the usage of that data, but also then retention and destruction of that data as well. So, how long do you keep it? When do you get rid of it? I think the other thing that we've started to do is rather than have one amorphous data management policy that no one can interpret, we've broken it down and we've got a data quality strategy and a metadata management strategy and a lineage. So it's all broken down into the component parts and what the meaning of that thing is and why it's important and what it will ultimately give us in terms of the benefit it might bring or the risk mitigation, things like that. The other thing I'd overlaid to it is the context in which you're operating. So why do you need a data management policy? Why do you need a data governance policy? What is it that you're protecting against or trying to mitigate against? Because that's the thing that's going to sell it to the people that need to understand it. The contextual view of why it's important to have a metadata management policy. Because if I just said to any random employee across the partnership, there you go, there's the metadata management policy, can you read it and tell me what it's about? They'd be blank, right? But it's about what information do I need to provide to be able to enable you to do your job better? And if you think about it, it's quite easy from a grocery perspective. All of the ingredients, all of the nutritional information, that's all metadata. So again, it's contextualizing it to the point, and then being able to put some simple, clear statements down to be able to articulate why you'd then rinse and repeat that across other processes.
Great. And we'll just go for one more. There's one here that asks what the biggest challenges for data teams and specifically data governance and data management teams are.
Biggest challenges for data teams. So data teams in general, I would say the quality of data will always be there. Talent shortage is still an issue, I'd say, and finding the right talent for the business is still an issue, and investment in that talent from the organisation. And I don't mean buy them an online training course for $4.99 from guess a provider and so on. I mean proper training to upskill them in the areas that they're in, or potentially pivoting from the roles. And I think skills-wise, still today in some of those kind of more traditional organisations for data people, it's get them. So I say this from the perspective, when I started as a data person, I used to be locked in a room which had a pass. So within the office floor, imagine another room that you needed a pass to go into. I used to be in that room to begin with. But so for those organisations, it's get them out of the room and teach your data people to be better at communications.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think there's certainly that aspect, putting the data people and the business people closer together to be able to find the value and be able to make the magic happen. I think the other thing for me is the market's changing vastly. It's almost like the software engineering, software development market was a few years ago. We're seeing the generalization of data roles being broken down into specialist roles, even all the way down to, Waseem mentioned earlier, prompt engineering is something that never used to exist. You were a data person before, you were a data person and you either did back end or front end. Now you're a data engineer, you're a data analyst, you're an ML engineer, you're a data scientist. Like, there's so many more roles. For someone new into the industry, navigating that is really hard. So I think, we've all, as professionals, we've all got a part to play in being able to articulate what that means, but also how the skills you've got as a business analyst translate into data management analysis or into analytics into data science. So we've got a role to play there as data leaders to be able to help people understand how to navigate the industry. And I think that just leads to a worsening of the skill shortage. People don't understand where they need to go and focus. So they go, well, it's too complicated, it's difficult, I'm not going to do it. So I think there's a bit of a PR play that we need to do there on skills. And
Michael's just asked, how long do you think it will be for employers to catch up with these important points and make real progress?
That's a great question. Go on, Barry.
Oh, thanks, well, so, I think the stat is the average tenure of a CDO is 2 to 3 years. They're clearly longer than 3 years because it doesn't seem to be sinking in at the moment. I think we'll start to see a step change. And I think there'll be two aspects to this. There'll be the GDPR effect where regulation brings litigation, and we'll start to see some hefty fines and folks getting scared, and that will make certainly PLCs wake up and want to do the right thing or want to act faster. And then I think the other side of it is people will start to rapidly lose commercial advantage, competitive advantage in whatever it is they do. Even non-profits will start to diminish in their ability to make things happen. So I think folks will start to wake up, but I don't think it's going to be an immediate thing. It's going to be over a number of years.
Yeah, I do agree. And I'd also say that there's organisations trying to do it actively at the moment as well in terms of investing. So I would say some of these more traditional organisations, if Michael's question is referring to them, should probably reference some of the more kind of startups or insurtechs, fintechs, etc., to seek kind of motivation from them as well. I mean, if you look at history, sorry to mention Blockbuster and Netflix again, the model was exactly the same. One had it online, had a recommendation behind it, and the other one was a physical outlet in a shop, right? But one used data better in order to be able to kind of process that, process the user experience and understood that, versus the other one didn't so much, I guess. And the result is in front of us, right? So I think organisations are trying to do it. I would say that the larger, more traditional organisations should take inspiration from the small startups and try and seek learning from them as well.
Yeah. Interesting, great. Thanks for that. I'm just going to fire one last question at each of you before we wrap up here. As my final question, Barry, I'll come to you first. What is the one thing you want to see emerge in data management this year?
I think the broader data industry helping data management succeed. There's lots of hype, as we talked about, around large language models being available for commercial advantage. Large language models being available to help with attribute definition and data governance activities would massively accelerate everybody's data governance journey. Semantic embedding, semantic definition of data, I think is going to be something that we'll start to see take off in 2024, where the data governance industry picks up the fact that data science can help it go faster.
I'd love to see a focus on data leaders selling the benefits of going into roles around data governance and data management.
And just for those of you listening, if you are interested in having a chat with us further, please feel free to reach out. If you're looking to get into data governance and data management, or you're a hiring manager looking to hire and build out a team, please don't hesitate to reach out and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode, brought to you by the Harnham Group. We'd love it if you would share the podcast on social media and leave a comment or a review to help us reach a bigger audience. If your company is having difficulty finding skilled data professionals, you can rely on the global leader in data and analytics recruitment, staffing and talent development to assist you with your hiring needs. Find out more at www.harnham.com. Thank you for listening.